The mark on her neck had long since scarred over, but Elara still felt its burn. Not in flesh, but in spirit. The pain wasn't searing, not anymore. It was constant, dull, and deeper than nerves. It was the weight of ownership. A wolf without a name. She shifted her grip on the silver tray she carried, its reflective surface catching a glimpse of her hollowed expression as she moved between long tables in the North Dominion's feasting hall. Amber eyes downcast, shoulders rolled forward in practiced submission, Elara poured spiced wine for monsters who hadn't spared her more than a glance. She wasn't expected to exist beyond her function. Beneath the crushed herbs sewn into her linen collar, wolfsbane, elderroot, and burnt juniper, her true nature was buried. The scent of an omega erased, hidden. If anyone suspected she was unclaimed, unmarked by bond, she'd be dragged to the trade pits by nightfall. She'd watched Sable disappear that way a year ago. No body had ever returned. The clamor around her rose, preparations for the convergence, a once-in-a-decade summit between rival dominions. Elara moved like fog between wolves, visible yet untouchable. Group 2. Hall of Lords. Move. The command cut through the air like a whip. Overseer Varn, his voice sharp and acidic, nodded toward the highest dais. Elara's stomach turned to ice. Group 2 served highborn alphas. Dangerous. Entitled. Drunk. The kind who mistook obedience for consent. As she bent to retrieve a decanter, Varn's fingers clamped around her wrist. "Don't forget who owns you," he hissed, his thumb pressing cruelly into the brand on her neck, a stylized thong curling around a crescent. The sigil of the Slave Guild. Elara didn't flinch. Flinching invited punishment. "Yes, Overseer," she whispered, her voice dust. She turned and walked toward the Hall of Lords where the fates of nations and wolves were decided, unaware that her steps were pulling her toward the most dangerous creature to ever walk the dominions, and that her wolf, long caged, was about to awaken. The Hall of Lords pulsed with tension. Moonlight filtered through high-arching windows, casting silver shafts over ancient stone. Banners representing each dominion fluttered along the upper galleries, Midnight Vale, Emberreach, Iron Hollow, and above all, the North. Elara moved like a shadow across the edges of the chamber, tray balanced in trembling hands. Her heart thudded against her ribs with each step. Group 2 servers were positioned like ornamental dolls around the long central table, chosen for their symmetry, grace, and subservience. Each wore the dull gray uniform of the branded. But Elara, with her amber eyes and quiet defiance, stood out like fire in snow. "Put her by the Shadowfang delegation," Varn ordered, waving his hand lazily. His gaze swept over Elara, lingered on the faint shimmer of her skin, and curled into a sneer. "The Savage King likes pretty things." Shadowfang. The name alone sent a chill through the air. Whispers had preceded their arrival. Kael Draven, Alpha King of Shadowfang, ruler of the Blackened Mountains beyond the wastes. A hybrid part vampire, part werewolf. Born of 2 blood curses and the old moon magic, he was a being out of legend, said to be immortal, monstrous, and merciless. The Shadowfangs had no slaves, no brands, no collars. They obeyed only their king. And tonight, for the first time in over a century, Kael himself was attending the convergence. Elara's hands tightened around the decanter. Something stirred inside her, something primal. Her wolf shifted uneasily beneath her skin, still numbed by years of suppression, but now, twitching. Then the great obsidian doors opened. The room fell utterly silent. He entered like a shadow given form. Kael Draven was not a man. He was carved from midnight, every line of him refined and ruthless. His features held the impossible beauty of vampires, ageless, aristocratic, but touched by something darker. His hair fell in raven waves to his shoulders, his eyes hidden behind a crimson gaze that shimmered like burning coals. He wore no crown. He needed none. Even among the assembled alphas, the most dominant males in the realm, all lowered their gazes as he passed. But his eyes, those impossible eyes, lifted. They swept the room and landed on her. Elara froze. Her wolf shuddered violently, then surged toward the surface like a storm breaking its cage. Mate. The word didn't come from her mind. It came from her bones. Kael's step faltered, so slight no one but her could have noticed. But it was there. A ripple in his composure. His nostrils flared, his gaze sharpening like a predator scenting prey. Her collar burned. The wolfsbane. The herbs. They weren't enough. He had scented her anyway. Her hands trembled as she stepped forward, pouring wine before the Shadowfang table. She didn't look up. She couldn't. But she could feel the weight of his gaze tracking her every move. He had found her. And nothing in the Dominions would stop what came next. Elara's tray was empty, her fingers trembling as she retreated toward the servants' wall. Her breath came shallow, like the air itself resisted entering her lungs. Behind her, the alphas murmured in stiff formality, exchanging veiled barbs over wine and territory, pretending they weren't in the presence of something ancient and unknowable. Kael Draven had not spoken a word. Not since entering. Not since finding her. Elara's wolf whimpered in the corner of her soul, clawing at invisible walls. For the first time in years, it had a scent to chase. Recognition to hold. She reached the edge of the hall when her name, her real name, unspoken for so long, ghosted across her ears. Elara. The voice didn't carry. It whispered. Soft as silk across stone. She turned. Kael stood. Every eye in the room shifted toward him. The Shadowfang guards tensed, still and ready. His fellow alphas stilled. Even Lord Velker of the North, whose cruel sneer never left his lips, froze in calculating suspicion. Kael said nothing to them. Nothing at all. Instead, his gaze was fixed entirely on her. He walked toward her, not with the pomp of a king, but with the slow, deliberate steps of a predator in full control. The room seemed to shrink with every footfall. Elara couldn't breathe. She should have looked away. Bowed. Run. She didn't. Not this time. His approach halted a breath's distance from her. Her chin was still lowered, but her wolf roared, surging inside her like fire behind her ribs. She couldn't stop it. She looked up. Amber eyes met glowing crimson. And the bond snapped into place with the force of a lightning strike. Every breath vanished from the room. Elara gasped, nearly dropping the tray as something ancient and blood-deep erupted in her chest. A pull, a tether, a recognition that reached past the soul into something older. Older than any slave mark. Older than laws. Older than names. Mate. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. Kael's expression shifted only slightly. A twitch of the lips. A narrowing of the eyes. Elara, he said again. Her name now carried weight. Power. Ownership. But not the kind forced by chains. The kind earned by fate. A sharp voice broke the silence. Shadowfang. That slave is northern property. Lord Velker had risen, his thin smile stretched taut over his teeth. Branded and trained by the guild. She bears our mark. Kael didn't look at him. She is mine, the Alpha King said simply. The words landed like a thunderclap. Lord Velker went pale. You can't just. I can, Kael growled, his voice low and lethal. I have. The hall exploded into chaos. Chairs scraped marble. Alphas shouted over one another, accusations, denials, ancient laws cited and twisted. Guards moved, some drawing weapons half an inch from their sheaths before being frozen by the glare of their betters. But Kael Draven never blinked. He stood still as stone, crimson eyes locked only on Elara. Velker's voice rose above the rest, oily and furious. That creature is bound by guild brand. A Shadowfang Alpha has no claim over northern property. Kael's lips peeled back, not in a smile. In a snarl. She is not property. She bears the blood brand, Velker snapped. Stamped into her as a pup. Paid for. Documented. You may fancy her scent, Alpha, but she was never yours to take. Kael's voice came colder than death. Say it again. The hall quieted, that quickly. Even the Shadowfang guards took a measured step back. Velker hesitated, lips twitching. Say what? That she was never mine, Kael repeated. Say it again. His fangs lengthened slightly, just enough to catch the glint of moonlight. Not fully shifted, not yet. But the beast was close enough for even the drunken alphas to sober. Kael turned to Elara slowly, hand outstretched, not commanding, but inviting. His voice dropped to something only she could hear. Come to me, little wolf. I'll never take what isn't freely given. Something broke in her chest. Choice. She had never been given it. Not once in her life. And now it stood before her, in the form of the most terrifying being in the realm. His power curled not around her throat, but around her future. She stepped forward. One step. Then two. A ripple ran through the room as she crossed the invisible boundary that separated servants from rulers. Her fingers touched his. The bond between them roared to life. Silver flame danced across her veins. She felt it, the truth undeniable. The wolf within her howled in joy, no longer whimpering in the dark, but sprinting free beneath starlight. She walks freely, Kael said, his voice now carrying the weight of command. And she chooses. Velker's sneer twisted. She was bought, trained, broken. She's nothing. And your claim means nothing unless challenged. Kael's head tilted. Then challenge me. A stunned silence followed. Velker's mouth opened, then shut. No alpha challenged Kael Draven. It was suicide. But he didn't need to. I invoke the right of provenance, Velker spat. By ancient law, the brand must be examined. If the blood brand exists, she is guild property, no matter what your nose says. Elara flinched. She knew what they'd see. The scar. The symbol. The cursed mark that had defined her life. Kael's hand tightened around hers. Let them look, he said. And let the world see what they did to you. The hall was deathly silent as Elara slowly rolled up her sleeve. Each movement felt like peeling back skin. Not because of pain, but because of shame. Shame forged over years, a weight that had shaped her posture, her voice, her silence. The room watched as the mark emerged. Branded into her flesh just above the wrist was the unmistakable emblem of the slave guild, a crescent fong within a broken circle. It had been pressed into her skin with molten silver when she was no more than 12. When her heat first surfaced. When she'd cried and begged and no one had listened. Kael's jaw tensed. A low, vibrating growl began in his throat, barely audible, but so deep it rattled the goblets on the table. Velker smiled like a spider. There, he said, with dark satisfaction. The proof. She is not yours. Kael didn't look away from the brand. He stared at it as if memorizing every curve of the scar, every twist of the pain she'd endured. He reached out, not to her wrist, but to her shoulder, steadying her, anchoring her. Elara, he said softly, his voice no longer for the hall. Only for her. This mark is not your truth. She blinked up at him, unsure how to breathe. His eyes flashed crimson gold, light catching on the inhuman facets of his hybrid soul. This mark is their lie. Their fear. Their guilt, branded onto your skin so they could sleep at night. It is not you. A hush fell over the hall. No matter what law they invoke, Kael said louder now, addressing the gathered dominions, no matter what blood contracts they forged behind closed doors, this wolf is mine. Not by purchase. Not by politics. By bond. His voice deepened into something darker. If you wish to contest it, bring your warriors. Call your courts. Challenge my right in blood. No one moved. Not one alpha spoke. Velker's smile faltered. A Shadow Fong diplomat stepped forward. By law, the guild's claim can be superseded only by two forces, a mate bond sanctioned by magic. He looked directly at Elara, then to Kael. Or by proof that the bond has awakened lost lineage. Murmurs echoed around the room. Kael turned to her once more. Elara, he said, softer than before, will you allow me to protect you? Tears burned in her eyes, but did not fall. Yes, she whispered. Not as your property. As your equal. That single word, yes, rang louder than any declaration of war. It carried not only through the Hall of Lords, but deep into the marrow of those listening. It shattered centuries of silence. Of obedience. Of fear. And for Elara, it shattered something else. The seal. She didn't realize what was happening until her vision blurred. Her knees buckled. Kael caught her instantly, pulling her into his arms as her body shook violently. Heat surged through her veins, not from fever, but from magic long sealed away. Her wolf roared behind her ribs, furious, awakening from a prison of wolfsbane and silver dust. Something inside her had broken or been set free. The hall gasped. Light exploded beneath her skin, bright silver fire radiating from her chest. Her branded wrist glowed, the scar pulsing as ancient magic sparked to life. Kael's voice was at her ear. "Don't fight it. Let her out." Her bones shifted. Not enough to change, not yet. But she could feel the swell of the transformation rising, the long-repressed instinct to shift, to howl, to hunt, to be whole. Her wolf, suppressed for over a decade, was no longer bound. And the magic that had silenced her? Cracking, flaking away like ashen wind. "She's awakening," one alpha whispered, stepping back. "The bloodline goddess, it's real." Velker's expression had gone ghost white. "This is impossible," he breathed. "The suppressant collars, she was dosed since birth." "Since you caged her," Kael snapped, his arms steadying Elara as her body settled, glowing embers still dancing along her skin. And still she rose. A member of the Midnight Veil delegation stepped forward, a sharp-eyed female with silver tattoos curling over her cheekbones. "That magic, it's not just feral awakening. It's old. Lunar." Kael met her gaze. "She's of the old line. The blood of the Moonborn." Gasps broke through the room. Even the most powerful alphas looked shaken. "No wolf has carried that blood in generations," the woman whispered. "They tried to erase it," Kael said. "Breed it out. Color it. Brand it." He looked down at Elara, who now stood on her own, the glow fading from her skin, her eyes burning amber bright with power. But it survived. In her. Velker took a trembling step back. "She'll be hunted. Every Dominion will want her silenced." Kael's fangs glinted. "Let them try." The summit was over in all but name. The moment Kael stepped from the dais with Elara at his side, the Hall of Lords fractured. Whispers became arguments. Declarations became veiled threats. Alliances shifted like sand under blood-wet boots. But Kael didn't look back. His stride was smooth, unstoppable, his presence demanding space even from those who ruled nations. Elara walked beside him, still dazed, still glowing faintly. Not from magic, though the remnants shimmered beneath her skin, but from freedom. No collar weighed her neck. No overseer barked orders. No tray to carry. No eyes looking through her like she was nothing. She was seen. As they passed the carved stone corridor beyond the council chamber, Shadowfang warriors fell into formation behind them. Tall, armored, eyes glowing faintly red. They didn't speak. They didn't gawk. They treated her like one of them. Her heart caught in her throat. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice rasped from disuse and sudden power. Kael didn't stop walking. "Away from this viper nest. They won't let you leave with me." Kael finally looked at her, expression unreadable. "They can try." She swallowed. "Why me?" He paused in a private antechamber just beyond the inner gates and turned toward her fully, lowering his voice. "I didn't expect to find you," he said. "I'd heard rumors of Omega suppression in the Northern Territories. Slave trade in defiance of treaty. Branded wolves. But I assumed." He cut off. His jaw clenched. "I assumed wrong. I don't understand what's happening to me," she whispered. "I feel like my skin doesn't fit anymore. Like I've outgrown something I didn't know was caging me." Kael nodded. "You have. They buried your wolf. Forced her into sleep. But the bond between us woke her. And the magic? That," he hesitated, watching her closely. "That runs deeper. The Moonborn haven't walked the Dominions in centuries. But if you carry their blood, if you are one of them," he lowered his voice, "then everything changes. Not just for me. For every wolf still living in chains." A silence fell between them. Then Kael added, quietly, almost like an oath. "With you, we can burn the guild to the ground." Elara stared at him, barely breathing. Burn the guild to the ground. It sounded like madness. Or prophecy. Or both. You think I'm a weapon, she said softly, more to herself than him. No, Kael replied. I think you're a revelation. She shook her head, heat rising in her cheeks. I'm barely holding myself together. I don't even know who I am without the collar. Without the orders. Without. He stepped closer, gently placing 2 fingers under her chin, lifting her face to meet his. You are mine, he said, firm and unyielding, but not because I claimed you. Because fate did. Their bond pulsed between them soft now, not violent or overwhelming, but steady. A thread woven into their cores. I don't want to belong to anyone, Elara whispered. You won't. His eyes softened. Not even me. But if you choose to fight, if you choose to rise, I will fight beside you. I will never chain you. Elara felt it again, that trembling in her chest. Not fear. Hope. And just as quickly, the old instinct returned. Don't trust it. Hope gets you killed. She turned away from him. I need time, she murmured. To breathe. To think. Kael didn't argue. You'll have it. A knock came, sharp, deliberate. A Shadowfawn guard opened the chamber door, nodded once to Kael, and spoke. They've called a private summit, Your Majesty. The guild's emissaries arrived ahead of schedule. North and East Dominions want blood. Kael's eyes went cold. And they'll get it if they push. The guard added, they've invoked the tribunal accord. Elara frowned. What's that? Kael exhaled slowly. A forgotten clause. It forces all bonded wolves to present themselves for magical evaluation, in case the bond was forged under false pretenses or coercion. Her blood ran cold. They think you tricked me, she said. No, Kael replied. They think I stole you. And they're trying to use old magic to force the bond to break. Elara's wolf snarled inside her. What happens if the tribunal finds us incompatible? Kael didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. She already knew. If they could prove she was unfit, the guild would reclaim her. And this time, they would kill her before letting her go. The chamber was old, older than the palace, older than the dominions. Circular, carved into raw stone veined with ancient silver, and laced with runes that pulsed faintly underfoot. It smelled of magic. Old, merciless magic. Elara stood at the center, Kael just behind her, his presence like a shadow pressed to her spine. Around them stood the tribunal, 3 cloaked figures, faces hidden, magic woven into the fabric of their robes like threads of starlight. Each one represented a dominion, East, North, and the guild. The bond must be tested, intoned the central figure. For it holds dominion-shifting power. If it is forged falsely, it must be severed. If it is pure, it must be declared. Elara's hands trembled, but she didn't fall. She couldn't. Not with Kael so still behind her, radiating strength she could pull from like breath from wind. The cloaked figure raised a hand. A ring of white fire surrounded them both, forcing her and Kael to turn toward one another. Look into each other's eyes, the tribunal ordered. Speak nothing. Let the magic decide. Kael's gaze met hers, and it wasn't just love, or fate, or desire she saw there. It was recognition. The fire pulsed outward. Elara gasped as it burned against her skin, not pain, but memory. She saw a flash of her childhood, running barefoot in the woods, silver streaking through her hair before the guild took her. She saw a shadow in those woods, him, before he was a king, watching her from afar. The magic grew brighter. They had met before. As pups. Before her branding. Before fate was torn apart. That memory, that shared spark, fed the bond until it erupted. The circle exploded in silver flame. The tribunal's shields flared, barely protecting the observers from the blast. The room howled with wind. The ancient runes screamed with recognition. And when the light faded, Kael and Elara still stood, untouched, their hands clasped, their bond blazing like a star between them. The lead figure of the tribunal bowed their hooded head. The bond is true, they said. And it is ancient. Another added, almost reverently, moonborn blood confirms it. The guild has no claim. Elara exhaled, staggering. Kael caught her, strong arms around her waist. It was done. The guild could no longer touch her. But even as the fire faded, Elara sensed something darker curling at the edges of the moment, something watching, waiting. Because now, she wasn't just bonded. She was a threat. They left the tribunal chamber in silence. Elara's body still thrummed with the aftermath of raw magic, her fingertips tingled, and her bones ached with the sudden expansion of what she now was. Her wolf was no longer subdued, no longer buried beneath suppressant herbs and spells. It prowled beneath her skin, wild and alert, no longer silent. She was free. But freedom, she was learning, came with dangerous visibility. Kael's jaw was set, crimson eyes forward. His grip around her hand never wavered, but something in him had shifted too. "What's wrong?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. Then, someone tampered with the tribunal. Elara blinked. "What do you mean?" "They ruled in our favor." "Because the bond was undeniable," Kael growled. "But the test, it was infused with coercion magic. The fire would have forced a collapse in any lesser bond." Elara's blood chilled. "You mean, if we hadn't been true mates, it would have shattered me?" "It would have shattered both of us." His voice was grim. "And no one would have questioned it." She swallowed hard. "Velker. Or the guild. Or both. Doesn't matter." He turned his head, gaze fierce. "They know what you are now. And they're afraid." Elara stopped walking. "What exactly am I?" Kael looked at her for a long time. "Newborn," he said finally. "Descendant of the first wolves blessed by the lunar gods. Their bloodline was said to have died out over 100 years ago, hunted down because they were immune to control." Her pulse skipped. No heat cycles. No suppression. No forced bondings. The Moonborn chose freely. And their power, he added, voice darkening, was the only thing the guild could never leash. Elara took a shaky breath. "But I don't know how to use it. I don't know how to be what they fear." Kael's expression softened. "You don't have to know how yet. You just have to survive long enough to learn." From behind them, a Shadow Fong soldier appeared, gray-eyed, breathless. "Sire, we've intercepted a coded raven." Kael took the scroll, eyes scanning it. His silence was sharp. "What is it?" Elara asked. He handed it to her. The script was Northern code, but Kael had underlined one part in red ink. "Initiate Phase 2. The girl must be silenced before the bond is consumed." She looked up, heart hammering. "They're planning to kill me." Kael's fangs bared. "Then let them come," he said coldly. "And let them learn what happens when you threaten my mate." Night had fallen by the time they reached Kael's temporary quarters in the Summit Keep. The chamber was warded thick stone, enchanted steel shutters, guarded by elite Shadow Fong sentinels, but Elara felt no safer. Not with those words burning behind her eyes. "Initiate Phase 2. The girl must be silenced before the bond is consumed." "What does it mean?" she asked, pacing near the hearth. "What happens if the bond is consumed?" Kael leaned against the stone archway, arms crossed, watching her carefully. "It means if we complete the bond," he said quietly, "you'll carry a piece of my power. Permanently." Elara froze. "You mean?" Her voice trailed off. "You mean if we mate?" He nodded once. True mate bonds could be acknowledged by fate. But to be sealed, to be consumed, they had to be physically completed. Fully. A flush spread up Elara's neck. Her wolf stirred with interest, but the human part of her recoiled, torn between instinct and fear. "I'm not ready," she admitted. Kael stepped forward immediately. "Then it won't happen. Not until you choose it. Not until you're safe." The words grounded her. But outside the safety of that moment, danger was closing in. Kael's second-in-command, a sharp-eyed woman named Bryn, burst into the chamber without knocking. "Sire. Breach in the northern wing. 2 guards down. No survivors." Kael's entire body changed. Not shifted, just snapped into war. "Assassins?" he asked. Bryn nodded grimly. "Guild-trained. Silver blades. No scent trail." Elara went cold. "They're already here." Kael's head turned sharply toward her. "We have to move. Now." Elara's instincts screamed at her to run, but Kael was already in motion, issuing low, precise orders to his warriors. Bryn passed Elara a dagger, silver-hilted, moonsteel blade, humming faintly with protection runes. It'll burn your hand, Bryn warned. But it'll get a guild hunter before you hit the ground. Elara nodded, gripping it tight despite the sting. Before they could move, a deafening crash echoed from the far corridor, stones splintering, steel shattering. Then silence. Kael's eyes gleamed red. "They're not coming to kill you," he said, low and certain. "They're coming to take you alive." The door blew inward. Not kicked. Not rammed. Exploded a flash of blue fire and bone-shaking force that hurled the front guards backward like rag dolls. Before the smoke cleared, they were already inside. 3 figures, clad in black leathers lined with silver thread. Faces masked, scent cloaked by bloodroot powder and rune ink. Guild assassins. Elara had seen their kind only once before, when Sable disappeared. Kael shoved Elara behind him, motioning Bryn and 2 other warriors forward. "Alive," one assassin growled. "She must be taken alive. Kill the rest." They moved as one. Kael's warriors engaged instantly, steel on steel, claws meeting silvered blades, but these weren't street killers. They were ritual-bonded bladesingers, bound by oath and blood to the guild's highest order. Fast. Silent. Deadly. Elara backed toward the inner door, clutching the dagger Bryn had given her. Her wolf screamed inside her fight. Shift. Run. But shifting now would take too long. She needed focus. She needed a window. One of the assassins broke through the guard line and lunged straight for her. Kael intercepted him midair. The hybrid king's hand punched through the assassin's chest before the man could land. Heart. Gone. Elara staggered back against the wall, heart slamming, as Kael turned to the next 2 attackers, blood dripping from his claws. But even then, one assassin slipped past. A blur of dark movement, straight toward Elara with a needle-thin blade glowing blue in the torchlight. Poison. The wolf inside her rose with a roar. Instinct surged. She ducked beneath the slash and drove the moonsteel dagger upward, right into the killer's gut. He gasped, eyes wide, more in shock than pain, before collapsing, dead before he hit the floor. Her hand burned, the silver in the hilt searing her skin, but she didn't drop it. Kael turned just in time to see the last assassin fall. It was over in under a minute. The chamber was littered with bodies. Bryn panted, wiping blood from her jaw. "If this was Phase 2, we won't survive Phase 3. Kael walked to Elara and took her scorched hand gently. "You're hurt." "It's nothing. You killed him." "I didn't think. I just moved." Kael's crimson eyes burned with pride. "Good." Bryn glanced at the corpses. Guild bladesingers don't move without direct command. Someone gave the order. Elara met Kael's gaze. "Velker." He nodded. "And the guild council itself." Her pulse quickened. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They'll keep coming." Kael's voice was iron. "Then we stop them first." The corpses were burned before dawn. Shadowfang warriors stacked the remains of the guild assassins in the courtyard and set them alight with black fire. No mourning rites, no words spoken. It was the old way. The war way. Elara stood beside Kael on the balcony, wrapped in a cloak of deep charcoal fur, the morning wind tugging her hair loose. She hadn't slept. Couldn't. Not after feeling what it was like to kill. Not after feeling what it was like to survive. The branded girl who once served wine and silence was gone. Something older had risen in her place. "They came for you under peace terms," Kael said quietly. "On summit grounds. It's an act of war." Elara didn't answer at first. She was watching the fire, letting the heat of it seep into her bones. Her fingers, still bandaged from the moonsteel blade, throbbed in time with her heartbeat. "They won't stop until I'm dead," she said. "Or caged." "No," Kael said. "They won't stop until you make them afraid." She turned to look at him. "Then let's give them a reason to be afraid." That night, Kael summoned the Shadowfang War Council. They gathered in secret beneath the keep, in a chamber lit by volcanic glass and starlight leaking through ancient cracks in the stone. Elara stood beside him, unmasked, uncollared, unbowed. "This isn't just about me," she told the gathered wolves. "It never was. The guild may have tried to erase me, But they've been erasing all of us, every wolf born with a spark they couldn't control. Murmurs echoed through the room. The branded. The silenced. The ones who vanish into the heat camps and never come back. You know their names. Some of them were yours. Bryn stepped forward, her voice strong. I lost a sister to the guild. Another warrior growled. My mate was taken before the bond could form. Labeled defective. She died in the breeding pits. Elara's hands clenched. Her wolf howled inside her, loud and furious. We don't need more law, she said. We don't need more diplomacy. We need fire. We need rebellion. She turned to Kael, who studied her not with ownership, but with respect. I want to go to the people, Elara said. Not the courts. Not the dominions. The branded. The lost. The hidden. The ones like me. You want to start a movement, Kael said. No, Elara replied. I want to start a revolution. They traveled by night. Kael's forces moved like ghosts, silent, swift, and unseen. Elara rode at the center of the formation, hooded and cloaked, not as cargo to be hidden, but as a flame that burned too brightly to expose too soon. Their destination, Dagger Reach, a mining hold near the border of the East Dominion, where rumors whispered of a branded resistance buried beneath the ash. If the guild suspects you're alive, Bryn said, riding beside her, they'll already have eyes on every passage north. Let them look, Elara said. The road narrowed, and the forest thickened, but her vision felt clearer than it had in her entire life. It wasn't just adrenaline or the nearness of Kael's bond. It was clarity. Purpose. The fear was still there. But it was smaller now. Manageable. She had burned. And survived. At dawn, they reached the outskirts of Dagger Reach. A dead town to the casual observer, shuttered homes, covered streets, and a sky thick with fog. But Elara felt them. Eyes in the dark. Wolves in hiding. Kael's warriors stayed back while Elara and Bryn advanced to the center of the ruined square. Bryn dropped her hood first, revealing the war sigil of Shadowfang burned into her neck. Elara followed, pushing back her cloak, exposing the faded blood brand on her wrist, and just beneath it, the silver Mooborn glyph that had emerged after the tribunal. The mark shimmered like frost light under her skin. A low growl echoed from the alleyways. Then a voice. Female. Rough with suspicion. Who dares show that brand in this place? Elara stepped forward, steady. My name is Elara, she said, voice ringing clear. Branded at 12. Sold at 14. Silenced for nearly a decade. The fog stirred. More shadows moved cautiously. I broke the collar they gave me, she continued. I stood in front of the guild and refused to kneel. And why should we believe you? Another voice snarled. You could be bait. A puppet for some alpha's pity cause. I'm no one's puppet. She raised her hand and let the magic flicker. Silver fire danced across her skin, not burning, not wild, controlled. Gasps rippled through the shadows. Mooborn, someone whispered. No, Elara said, her voice growing. Not just that. I'm every slave they branded. Every omega they silenced. Every pup they tore from their mother. I came to tell you this. She raised her voice to the crumbling buildings, the broken hearts hiding inside them. We are not theirs anymore. Silence. Then, one by one, figures stepped into the light, branded wolves, scarred, wary, but no longer silent. And they bowed. Not in submission. In recognition. The bowing wolves weren't servants. They were survivors. Scarred omegas. Rogues with half-healed bite marks. Elders whose packs had been torn apart by guild cleansings. Young ones barely into their shifts. Even a few alphas, their gazes haunted wolves who had lost everything, yet still clung to something more than fear. Elara felt their pain through her bond sense. Like pressure under her skin. Not directed at her, but surging toward her, searching for something solid to rally around. Hope. Kael stepped forward silently, but said nothing. This was Elara's moment. You don't have to trust me, she said. Not yet. A grizzled female with a faded guild scar across her throat approached. Her voice was gravel and moonsmoke. But you carry their mark, the woman rasped. You know the pain. The silence. And you still stand. Elara nodded. I didn't escape. I was freed by myself. By truth. By a bond they tried to erase. She held out her marked wrist. Every time they branded one of us, they marked the beginning of their end. A deep, quiet murmur spread through the gathered wolves. Bryn stepped forward, tossing a heavy satchel to the ground between them. It spilled open with small weapons, bundles of herbs, flame-inked scrolls. Resources, she said. For those willing to fight. Fight what? Someone asked from the back. The guilds everywhere. The dominions are in their pocket. They'll erase us before we rise. Kael's voice came low, calm, and cold. Then we don't rise in the open. He stepped into the circle, crimson gaze sweeping over the crowd. We infect the cracks. We whisper in their strongholds. We train, we unite, and when they finally see us. He glanced at Elara. It'll be too late. The fire pit at the center of the square was lit. Wolves circled it, listening. Watching. And Elara stepped forward with her dagger. She pulled off one of her gloves. Her fingers were still raw from moonsteel burns. She slashed the palm of her hand. Let the blood drip into the fire. The flames turned silver. I'm not asking you to follow a queen, she said. I'm asking you to follow yourselves. To fight for the pups still in chains. For the mates you never found. For the packs they broke. If we're going to burn, her voice rose, let it be on our terms. A howl broke the silence. Then another. Then a dozen. A chorus of rage, freedom, and wild, feral unity. And the fire beneath dagger reach began to spread. 2 nights later, the first strike fell. Not on a fortress. Not on a battlefield. But on a caravan, a guild-supplied train smuggling suppressant collars and heat control serums through the veiled pass under Dominion seal. Elara didn't lead the raid. She watched. Hidden high among the cliffs with Kael and Bryn, she saw branded wolves, now fighters, no longer prey, descend like shadows. They moved with precision, speed, rage sharpened into purpose. It was over in minutes. 3 guards dead. 8 captured. No civilians harmed. No fire set. Just the cargo seized, the route compromised, and a message left behind, carved into a fallen guild banner. We are not yours. We remember. We rise. The next morning, Kael handed Elara a scroll. From the East Dominion, he said, lips curled in something between grim amusement and anticipation. They want a meeting. Quiet. Unofficial. She frowned. Why? Because the guild can survive rebellion, Kael said. But it can't survive exposure. Elara opened the scroll. It was brief. Just 5 words. Let's discuss your movement. Privately. Do you trust them? She asked. Kael's eyes glittered. No. But they're afraid. That's useful. Later that night, in the quiet warmth of a stone room beneath Shadowfang's encampment, Elara sat alone. She stared at the map on the wall, dominions, guild routes, resistance cells now springing up like fireflies in the dark. It was happening. The world was shifting. She touched the edge of her wrist, the place where the brand once meant silence. Now it meant something else. War. Kael entered silently behind her. She didn't turn, but she felt the heat of him, his presence like gravity. They're coming for us harder now, she murmured. He stepped behind her, placed his hands gently on her shoulders. Let them. We might lose. Or we might finally burn them all to ash. She tilted her head back, letting herself lean against him. I'm not afraid anymore, she whispered. Kael's lips touched her hair, reverent and fierce all at once. You were never meant to be. The East Dominion's envoy arrived under heavy guard. 10 riders. 4 flagged carriages. 1 veiled noble. Elara met them in the shattered amphitheater at the edge of Ember Rift, the neutral zone once used for diplomatic tournaments, now reclaimed by wolves who didn't kneel. Kael stood at her side, Bryn behind. No crown. No court robes. Just shadow steel armor and a blade that had tasted guild blood 2 days ago. The noble stepped down. Lady Ceres of House Malverin, an alpha of old blood and older ambition. Pale as frost, draped in silks the color of dried wine, her mouth curved in a smile that never reached her calculating eyes. So she purred, approaching Elara, This is the moon-born girl causing all the noise. Elara didn't flinch. And you're the politician too cowardly to take a side until someone else bleeds first. Cyrus laughed softly. Sharp. I like that. Then listen closely, Elara said, stepping forward. You don't get to broker rebellion from behind silk curtains. You're either in this fully or you stay out of the way. Cyrus' expression didn't change, but something coiled behind her gaze. You mistake me, she said smoothly. I'm not here to join your war. I'm here to warn you. Kael raised an eyebrow. Warn us. The guild has gone underground, Cyrus said. Retreating? No. Regrouping. Rewriting old treaties. They've invoked Project Hollowborn. Elara's blood chilled. What is that? Cyrus lowered her voice. A breeding initiative. Covert. Authorized decades ago, but never activated. They've been raising wolves bred to resist the mate bond. Emotionless. Empty. Enhanced by ritual suppression. Weapons, not people. Kael's growl echoed across the stones. Why no? Elara asked. Because you exist, Cyrus said, voice barely audible now. Because the world is watching. And they've realized the only thing more dangerous than rebellion is hope. Elara turned slowly, spine straightening, fury rising. They're breeding wolves to replace us. To erase you, Cyrus corrected. And the next time they send assassins, they won't make the mistake of sending them with souls. Silence fell. Elara didn't speak for a long moment. Then, where are they training them? Cyrus hesitated, then reached into her sleeve and handed over a sealed black scroll. No crest. Just a rune etched in blood-red wax. Shadowgate Keep, she said. North of the wastes. A dead fortress. Or so the world thinks. Kael took the scroll. Why help us? Cyrus smiled again. Thin. Ambiguous. Because the guild promised me a seat at the table, she said. But you're about to burn the table. And I'd rather stand in the smoke than sit in the fire. Shadowgate Keep wasn't on any official map. It was a myth. A ruin. A haunted name passed in whispers by deserters and rogues, a place where wolves went in and didn't come out. It took 4 days to reach it. Through bitter wind and old paths once sealed by avalanche, Kael led the vanguard. Elara beside him, cloaked in obsidian fur and carrying more than daggers now. She carried intent. The branded had become the blade. Behind them followed 40 hand-picked rebels, branded wolves, rogues, and exiled alphas who had no throne left to protect. Bryn walked among them, quiet and sharp-eyed. As they crested the final ridge, the keep emerged from the fog like a buried god skeleton, all jagged towers and hollow-eyed windows, black stone half swallowed by snow. There were no banners. No visible guards. No sound. But Elara felt it. The hum. Magic, sealed into the bones of the place. Wrong. Cold. Familiar. This is a prison, she whispered. No, Kael said. It's a factory. They approached the gates at dusk. Kael's warriors breached the perimeter with silent precision, disabling enchanted wards and shadow steel tripwires woven into the snow. Inside, the walls pulsed with old ritual. They passed through corridors carved with sigils of obedience, the same that had once lined the guild's slave halls. Doors made of silverwood. Chambers filled with scent-neutralizing herbs. Then voices. Soft. Monotone. A chant. Elara and Bryn peered into a training hall. What they saw froze them both. 24 wolves, young, barely of age, stood in perfect rows. Identical uniforms. Identical movements. No scent. No eye contact. They moved as one, striking into the air in eerie silence. Those aren't trainees, Bryn said, horrified. They're constructs. No, Elara whispered. They're real. The room was filled with living, breathing wolves. But their wolves were gone. Suppressant tattoos covered their spines. Collars humming with runes of emotional erasure. This wasn't training. This was erasure. Kael's hand found hers. If we destroy the keep, they die too. Elara nodded slowly. Then we don't destroy it. We break it open. And we set them free. A sound echoed down the corridor, a metal door opening. And then a voice, sharp and amused. Well, isn't this poetic? Lord Velker stepped from the shadows, flanked by Hollowborn. And behind him, Sable. Alive. Colored. And weaponized. Elara couldn't breathe. Sable. Her best friend. Her sister by bond, not blood. Stolen years ago, dragged away by guild enforcers for non-compliance. Elara had wept for her, buried her in memory. And now she stood beside Lord Velker, taller, leaner, eyes hollow and unblinking. Dressed like the Hollowborn in guild black. A collar wrapped tight around her throat, humming faintly with spell-inked runes. But it was her. Alive. Weaponized. Sable, Elara whispered, taking a single step forward. Sable didn't move. Didn't blink. Kael caught Elara's arm. That's not her anymore. She's still in there, Elara snapped, eyes never leaving the girl she'd once braided flower crowns with under a violet moon. She has to be. Velker stepped between them, casual, confident, vile. You wanted proof, he said. Proof that the Hollowborn work. That loyalty can be bred. That memory can be scrubbed. He gestured to Sable with one elegant wave. She doesn't remember you, little Moonborn. But she knows how to kill you. Sable stepped forward. No hesitation. Elara flinched, her instincts screaming to retreat, but she didn't. She couldn't. Sable, she said softly, raising both hands. It's me. Elara. We ran the frost trails together. We used to make up stories about leaving the packs, remember? You hated your heat cycles. I used to bring you crushed frost peach petals for the pain. Sable's blade flicked out, silent, precise. Kael moved in front of Elara instantly, intercepting the strike with his vambrace. Steel on steel. Sable moved like shadow, swift, exact. Not feral. Programmed. Kael fought without killing, barely. Sable, please. Elara cried. Kael took a hit to the shoulder, then shoved her back. Talk fast, he growled. She's not going to hold. Elara knelt suddenly, slicing her own palm open again, blood spilling onto the cold stone. She slammed her hand against the floor. The Moonborn mark ignited in silver fire. Sable, she said again, voice echoing with something ancient, something hers. I am your pack. I am your moon. Wake up. The fire surged. Sable stumbled. Her blade wavered. Velker's eyes widened. No, he hissed. She's mine. Elara stood, glowing now, wolf half-shifting beneath her skin, eyes lit like twin embers. She was never yours. The silver light burst outward, smashing into the collar around Sable's throat. It cracked. Sable gasped. And screamed. Not from pain, but from memory. She dropped her blade. Elara. Elara ran to her, catching her just before she fell. Sable sobbed against her chest, shaking. I remember, she whispered. They took everything. Velker snarled. Kill them all. But it was too late. The Hollowborn hesitated. Watching what had just happened. Watching a weapon become a person again. And something broke. A few stepped back. One dropped their dagger. The spell tattoos on their spines flickered. Kael turned to Velker. You've lost. Velker drew his own blade, serrated, laced with poison, and lunged. Kael caught it in midair. And snapped his neck. Velker's body hit the stone floor with a final, echoing crack. Dead. For a moment, the entire world stood still. Then the room breathed, as if the very walls of Shadowgate exhaled after decades of holding tension and pain. The Hollowborn recruits stood frozen, wide-eyed, unshackled by orders they no longer understood. Without Velker's command, without the magic enforcing it, they hesitated. Kael turned to them slowly, not as a warlord, but as a wolf. You don't have to be what they made you, he said, voice steady, low, powerful. You don't have to kill to be seen. One of them, a boy, barely 17, fell to his knees and ripped the collar from his throat. I remember, my name, he whispered. Another followed. Then another. Collars fell like shattered manacles. And Elara, still holding Sable against her, rose. They tried to erase you, she told them all. But you're still here. And that means they failed. From the corridor above, Bryn appeared with the rest of their fighters, bloody, bruised, but victorious. The keep is ours, she said. We found the control room. The blueprints. The names. Elara's eyes sharpened. The names? Bryn nodded. Every noble who signed off on Project Hollowborn. Every alpha who approved the experiments. Every shipment, every council member who knew and said nothing. Kael looked at Elara. Time to use the fire. They marched into the main hall. At the center stood the guild's communication array, an obsidian mirror infused with bloodline echoes. It could send images across every dominion if triggered with the right frequency. Elara stepped in front of it and opened her palm again, letting a single drop of her blood strike the mirror's surface. Silver fire surged. The reflection shimmered. And then, every guild channel lit up. Across the dominions, at council meetings, courtrooms, military halls, and noble estates, Elara's image appeared. Branded no longer. Moonborn. Whole. Fire-eyed and fierce. My name is Elara, she said, voice calm and lethal. And I remember everything. I remember the screams of pups torn from their packs. I remember the colors. The suppressants. The silence. I remember Sable. Sable stepped into the frame beside her alive, eyes burning. I remember being erased, Sable said. Elara stepped forward. But now we remember who we are. Shadowgate has fallen. Velker is dead. The Hollowborn are free. We are not your property. We are not broken. And we are not done. The message ended in silence. But across the dominions, the fire had already started to spread. The response came faster than anyone expected. Less than 48 hours after Elara's message burned across the dominions, for high-ranking guild outposts fell into full lockdown. Trade routes seized. Communications silenced. Entire convoys vanished into smoke and silence. But the biggest blow came from the Midnight Vale, a region long believed neutral. Their High Alpha, Lord Sylvan Varric, publicly denounced the rebellion and pledged loyalty to the guild. Kael threw the report across the war map, his eyes blazing. They've sold their souls. Bryn leaned over the parchment. Varric's been holding guild stocks through puppet houses for years. We just didn't have proof. Now they're burning that evidence faster than we can expose it, Kael muttered. Elara stood in the corner, silent. Watching. Sable sat beside her, still healing, physically free, but emotionally cracked. Like a mirror glued back together with blood instead of silver. We made them bleed, Elara finally said. Now they're trying to prove they're still gods. Bryn frowned. We expected retaliation. But this scale. They're not just afraid, Elara said softly. They're desperate. Kael looked at her. Then we push harder. She nodded. But not with blades. He tilted his head. What do you mean? She stepped toward the war table, eyes sharp. We make them answer to their own. Not just guild allies, but wolves inside their own dominions. Ones with influence. Ones who've lost something. Kael's brow furrowed. You want to recruit the nobility? No, Elara said. I want to turn them. And so it began. While Kael and his generals prepared for the inevitable guild assault on Shadowfawn borders, Elara became the rebellion's voice. She spoke to the branded and the broken, but also to the high-ranking families who had suffered quietly. To alphas who had watched their mates be taken. To betas who had lost pups to the breeding camps. To healers who had witnessed Hollowborn births and never forgotten the silence in their cries. Some ignored her. Some reported her. But some listened. And one Lady Eileen Morthen, a High Council member of the Eastern Dominion, defected. She arrived at Shadowfawn Keep in person, cloaked and unannounced. I brought the guild's ledgers, she said. And the names of everyone who funded them. Kael was the one to speak. Why betray them now? She looked at Elara. My son was Hollowborn. He never learned to smile. And with that, the rebellion's fire turned into a storm. Shadowfawn Keep, once a symbol of isolation, had become the rebellion's heart. The walls thrummed with life. Branded warriors training in the old courtyards, Hollowborn recruits learning how to feel, healers tending to pups born in secret dens, and scroll runners dashing through stone corridors with names, numbers, strategies. Elara stood at the center of it all. No longer hiding. No longer running. A queen without a crown. But followed just the same. In the war chamber, the map was alive with new ink. Lines of movement. Supply routes. Intercepted guild communications. But one message pulsed above all others. A final warning. Shadowfang is to be purged. At full moon. All guild forces to converge. No survivors. Kael's hand gripped the table. So it begins, he said. Bryn's voice was grim. 3 legions. Hollowborn elites. Guild magic weavers. Air units from the Northern Vale. They're bringing everything, Kael said, turning to Elara. They're not trying to win a war. They're trying to end it in a night. Elara nodded slowly. Then let's make sure this night writes history. That evening, Elara stood before the rebellion, thousands strong now. Wolves from every dominion. Branded, hollowborn, rogue, noble. United not by bloodline, but by fury and purpose. She wore no armor. Only her moonborn mark. And the brand she'd never erased. Because she wasn't hiding who she had been. She was reclaiming it. They're coming for us with silver, fire, and fear, she said, her voice echoing off the mountain stone. They want to end this rebellion before it becomes a world. But we're already more than a rebellion. We're a reckoning. Cheers erupted raw, wild, full of teeth. We don't fight for thrones, she continued. We fight for the wolves who were never given a choice. For the ones who were bred for silence, born into cages, marked and erased. Her eyes burned silver bright now. We fight because the world forgot what happens when wolves stop kneeling. And we remind them. Kael stepped beside her, armor glowing with runes of war. Tonight, he growled, we hold the line. Tomorrow, Elara said, taking his hand, we burn the chains. And as the twin moons rose over the blackened peaks, the guild army appeared on the horizon. Tens of thousands. But Shadowfang did not cower. Because at its heart stood a girl once branded, now reborn. And she was ready. The guild descended with precision. Columns of soldiers marched through the mountain passes like shadow-draped serpents, rank upon rank of armored wolves, hollowborn shock troops at the front, siege mages in the rear, skyrunners circling overhead like carrion crows with flame in their wings. It was overwhelming. And it was exactly what Elara had planned for. Shadowfang's outer defenses held for the first hour. Kael commanded the front line, his hybrid form a blur of fangs and flame, crimson eyes cutting through the night like lanterns of death. Every warrior around him fought with the fury of the betrayed, every blade swung with memory behind it. Inside the walls, Elara moved like a general and a ghost. She wasn't just watching. She was everywhere, dragging wounded from burning corridors, whispering courage into the ears of branded fighters who still shook from decades of conditioning. In the heart of the keep, the hollowborn who had defected stood in a circle, casting protective wards, counterspells, and guiding freed recruits to safety. Sable stood among them, collar gone, eyes sharp. And she was smiling. Bring them in closer, Elara commanded through the bond link. Bryn's voice echoed in her mind. They're flanking the east wall. We'll lose the gate in 10 minutes. Let them. A pause. You're sure? Yes, Elara said. Because 10 minutes was all they needed. In the ritual chamber beneath Shadowfang, built long ago by wolves who had once worshipped the moon as more than myth, Elara stood before the old altar. She held a single vial of her own blood, laced with the essence of a reclaimed hollowborn. The ritual was dangerous, unstable, forgotten, but necessary. She poured the blood into the carved basin. The runes ignited. Above the mountain, the sky darkened unnaturally. One moon vanished. The other turned red. And every wolf on the battlefield froze. Pain surged through their veins, all of them. Guild wolves collapsed, screaming. Suppression collars sparked. Hollowborn howled in confusion as their enchantments shattered. Because Elara had done the impossible. She'd unbound the moon. No longer a passive light in the sky. Now it was a weapon. A force of memory. And the branded felt it first. Every mark burned, not with agony, but with recognition. Their wolves rose. No longer tamed. No longer leashed. From the front lines, Kael looked up and smiled. Elara's voice rang out through the keep, through the bond, through the blood still shared between wolves who had once been forgotten. We are not yours. We are not broken. We are not done. We are risen. The battlefield was chaos, not from failure, but from awakening. The guild's forces, once flawless in their formation, now fractured in real time. Hollowborn soldiers raised from infancy without identity or emotion, clutched their heads, staggered, fell to their knees. Some dropped their weapons, others stared at their bloodied hands like seeing for the first time. Their wolves were stirring. For the first time ever. And it terrified the guild commanders. From atop a siege platform, Grand Enforcer Thale roared orders. Contain the defectives. Activate the secondary collars. But it was too late. The enchantments were breaking. Elara's blood ritual had not just disrupted the battlefield. It had cracked the foundation of the Hollowborn project itself. One Hollowborn captain, a towering male with obsidian tattoos down his spine, rose from the blood-soaked ground and turned on his commander. With a single motion, he tore the man's throat out and howled a primal, broken sound that shook the front lines. Then others followed. 5, 12, 20. Hollowborn units, once the guild's unstoppable force, now scattered, some joining Kael's flank, some simply running, desperate to escape the lies burned into their souls. Sable stood at the northern wall, watching it unfold. Tears streaked her face. They're waking up, she whispered. Elara reached her through the bond. Guide them. I don't know how. You don't have to. Just stand. They'll follow. And they did. Sable climbed the barricade and raised her fist high, collar fragments tied around her wrist like a banner. Her voice cut through the confusion. You are not their weapons. You are wolves. And the Hollowborn, who had never been given names, howled with her. Kael pressed the attack. The eastern gate collapsed under the weight of rebel fury. Shadowfang warriors surged forward, driving back the last guild shock troops. Blood stained the stone, but it was guild blood now, not theirs. From above, siege mages attempted one last ritual. They never finished it. Elara appeared behind them in a flash of silver fire, blinking through moonlight like it was air. She moved like vengeance, fast, sure, devastating. Runes flared around her, powered not by rage, but by clarity. She killed 3 with one sweep of her blade. The 4th dropped to his knees. Please, he begged. I was only following orders. Elara stared at him, voice low and cold. So were we. And she walked away. Let the others judge. By dawn, the silence was unnatural. Not the tense, expectant hush before violence, but the kind that follows it. The siege was over. The guild forces were broken. Their legions scattered or dead. The few who surrendered had been disarmed and bound, not out of vengeance, but principle. They would face trials. Witness. Consequence. But not erasure. Because the new world Elara fought for would not be built on blood alone. Shadowfang Keep stood. Scarred. Burned. But still standing. Kael moved through the rubble like a ghost, checking the wounded, lifting collapsed beams, personally escorting the youngest survivors from the underground barracks. He found Elara where he expected. Standing at the same broken archway where they had first seen the guild army crest the ridge. Only now, there was nothing on the horizon. Just light. She turned when she heard him. Her eyes were bloodshot, hair wind-tossed, armor cracked. Yet there was something in her unbreakable. It's done, she said softly. Kael stepped to her side. No, he said. It started. Behind them, the branded walked freely. Hollowborn without collars shared food with exiles. Wolves of every rank, age, and scar tended to one another not out of obligation, but instinct. Pack. Real pack. Sable approached with a bundle of names, new names for the Hollowborn who had chosen to stay. They want to name themselves, she said with a crooked, tired smile. Some even chose the names of the wolves they lost. Elara reached out and hugged her. No words. Just a hold that said we're here and we're not leaving again. Kael watched the sunrise for a long moment before speaking. The other dominions will send envoys. I know, Elara said. They'll want negotiations. Demands. Concessions. I know. He looked at her, eyes burning gold. They'll want you to lead them. She met his gaze evenly. I don't want a throne. Good, Kael said. Then you might be the only one worthy of it. Elara exhaled. Not out of exhaustion, but release. Let them come, she said. We'll meet them not as rebels, but as a nation. And so the branded girl, once silent and shackled, stood at the edge of a new era. Not as a weapon, not as a pawn, but as a voice that could no longer be silenced. And behind her, the world began again. Peace, when it came, was not soft. It did not arrive with white banners or doves or treaties signed in golden ink. It came with uncertainty, with stunned silence from dominions that had always expected the guild to win, with power vacuums, with nobles too terrified to publicly side with Elara, but too frightened not to. And across the continent, one truth spread like wildfire. The branded had risen, the guild had fallen, and Elara of the Moonborn was no longer just a name. She was the beginning of something impossible. In the capital of the East Dominion, the council met in shadows. Whispers filled the palace halls. Do we bend the knee? She doesn't even wear a crown. She is the Hollowborn, the Shadow Fong, the rebellion. She is Kael. Even those who didn't believe in prophecies believed in survival. And Elara? She didn't seek thrones or formal rule, but she understood power. So she let them come. Delegates, envoys, nervous rulers and trembling lords. They arrived in Shadowfong not to dictate terms, but to ask. What would she demand? Would she take the guild seat on the High Circle? Would she lead a dominion of her own? Would she restore the branded wolves and Hollowborn to their proper place? And to every question, Elara gave the same answer. There is no proper place. Only what we choose to build next. At her side, Kael said little. But his presence spoke volumes. He was not her king. He was her equal. Their bond no longer something whispered about in fear, it was a symbol of what could exist outside old hierarchies, outside arranged fates and forced claims. And soon, others began to follow. Some dominions abolished heat bond registries. Others opened their borders to the freed Hollowborn. A few, predictably, resisted, until their own wolves, branded and otherwise, refused to kneel. A new map was forming, not one of territories, but of alliances, of ideals. Elara didn't rule it, but she guided it. And when the first branded Omega was elected to lead a settlement council in the north, she wept. Not for herself, but for the girl who'd once scrubbed floors in silence, dreaming of nothing more than a clean death. A year passed. One full turning of the twin moons since the fall of the guild. Shadowfong was no longer just a fortress. It was a capital of thought, of revolution, of possibility. Trade routes reopened. Reformed pacts flourished. Collars were outlawed across 5 dominions. And yet, peace was uneasy. Because while thrones trembled, not all had fallen. And not all enemies stayed dead. Elara felt it first. A dream. A shadow under her skin. A cold hand pressing against her mark in the dead of night, whispering in a voice that was not quite human. You took the body, but you never touched the root. She woke gasping in Kael's arms, his hand already over her heart. Another one, he murmured. She nodded, sweat beating down her spine. Worse this time. Not a memory. A warning. Kael frowned. Velker's dead. Then something wore his name. Kael rose, pacing the moonlit room, body tensed. We burned the guild's libraries. We broke their spells. Nothing survived. That's what we thought about the Hollowborn, Elara said. Later that morning, Bryn stormed into the council chamber with a missive clenched in her fist. No seal. No scent. Delivered in silence. Not even our wards caught it. Elara took the parchment, hands steady. Inside, a single line of runes burned in a color she hadn't seen since the darkest corners of Shadowgate. Phase 3 initiated. Below it, a symbol scorched into the parchment. Not the guild's crest. Something older. Kael stiffened beside her. That's pre-union. A sigil from before the dominions were divided, Bryn said. Before the guild even existed. Elara's breath caught. They were never the beginning, she whispered. Kael's voice went flat. They were the middle. Bryn stared at the symbol. Then who's phase 3? Elara met their eyes, silver burning in hers. I don't know, she said. But I'm going to find out. And far to the east, beyond the frostlands and the edge of every map, a shadow watched. Not guild. Not dominion. Something older. Something waiting. They called it the Evershade Expanse. A stretch of cursed tundra so cold it cracked stone and swallowed sound. No trade routes crossed it. No pack laid claim. It was marked on old maps with only one word: forbidden. But Elara and Kael went anyway. Because Phase 3 didn't start in the shadows of their rebellion. It started before it. Before the guild. Before the branding. Before the very laws that had bound wolves to silence for generations. According to the sigils on the scroll, the source of it all, the root, was buried beneath the ice. They rode with a small company, Bryn, Sable, and 2 Hollowborn scouts who'd shown a sensitivity to the arcane echoes in Elara's blood. They traveled light, quiet, through wind that could peel flesh, across plains where the sky didn't quite look real. And still, something called to them. Elara felt it in her teeth. Her blood. Her bond with Kael. A whisper older than language. This is where it began. This is where wolves were unmade. On the 4th night, they found it. A crevice in the ice, unnaturally straight, glowing faintly blue beneath the surface. Bryn knelt, brushing frost aside to reveal an ancient carving. Not wolf-made, she said. No, Elara agreed. But wolf-used. They descended carefully, blades drawn. As they moved deeper, the air changed. The cold became still. Watching. The walls weren't ice. They were crystal. And within them were figures. Frozen. Not guild. Not Hollowborn. Wolves. With no markings. No fur. No eyes. Sable recoiled. What are they? Elara touched the crystal with her bare palm, and memory slammed into her. Visions. Screams. Rituals under 3 moons, moons that no longer existed. Wolves bred not for power, but for obedience. Not by the guild. By something older. The Architects. An ancient faction of seers and bloodshapers who had tried, eons ago, to rewrite the wolf soul. The guild hadn't created control magic, they'd inherited it. Phase 3 isn't a guild project, Elara said, voice shaking. It's an awakening. Kael stepped beside her. And what wakes? From deeper in the crystal tunnels, something answered. A soundless voice. A presence older than names. The wolves who forgot will remember. The wolves who rose will fall. The blood must be balanced. And before anyone could react, the walls of the ice cracked. And something stepped out. Not a wolf. Not quite. But something that remembered being one. It was tall. Too tall. Not bound to any one shape. Its body shifted with the eye, like mist-given muscle. At moments it resembled a wolf, at others a beast of antlers and bone. But its eyes, if they could be called that, were constant. White. Endless. Void. Elara's wolf shrank away inside her, something she hadn't felt in months. Not fear. Recognition. The thing, no, the memory, spoke without words. Its voice pressed against their skulls like hands through glass. You are broken copies of what we made. You were meant to kneel, not love. The fire in you was never meant to survive. Sable stumbled back. Bryn raised her blade. The Hollowborn scouts trembled. But Elara stood her ground. Kael was already at her side, his aura flaring red, fangs half-bared. You tried to control us, Elara said, voice echoing unnaturally in the chamber. Then the guild tried. And they failed. They failed because they used names. The memory shifted closer now, flickering in and out of shape. We will not make that mistake again. You will forget who you are. And this time, there will be no fire left to rise from. It lunged. But Elara was faster. She reached deep past her wolf, past her moonborn blood into the raw, silver flame that had once unbound a sky. And she answered. A shockwave tore through the crystal cavern. The memory screamed fractured, ancient, in a language not spoken since the stars were young. Kael grabbed her wrist, steadying her. You can't hold that much power yet. I'm not trying to hold it, Elara gasped. I'm trying to wake it. Behind them, the frozen wolves in the walls began to stir. Not physically. Spiritually. Echoes of the first wolves, the ones the architects tried to rewrite, to erase, were still here, trapped in the ice. And they were angry. Sable dropped to her knees, eyes wide. "They're not dead," she whispered. "They're waiting." Elara's voice became a command. "Then rise." The crystal cracked. Silver fire surged through the fractures. And the ancient wolves, the ones who remembered freedom before obedience, howled. The memory shrieked, retreating into the shadows it had come from, fractured, wounded, no longer invincible. But not gone. Not yet. Elara collapsed to one knee, breath ragged, blood trailing from her nose. Kael caught her, wrapping his arms around her. "It saw you," he murmured. "It knows you now." Elara met his gaze, pale but defiant. "Good," she said. "Because now I see it too." The fire didn't leave her. Even after the memory fled into the deep, Elara still felt the pulse of it, silver light threading through her blood, not pain, but pressure. Possibility. And danger. Back in the surface camp, Kael paced like a caged storm. Sable kept watch over Elara, who lay in a fevered half-trance, her body flickering between forms, human, wolf, something else. "Her powers evolving," Bryn said, voice tight. The ice woke something in her. "She's not just moonborn anymore," Sable whispered. "She's touched something primordial." Kael stopped. "Then I need to reach her before it consumes her." He entered the tent. Inside, Elara lay drenched in sweat, the branded mark on her wrist glowing, her moonborn glyph pulsing in rhythm with something ancient and wild. Her skin shimmered with silver veins. Kael knelt beside her. "Elara," he said, voice low. "Come back." Her eyes opened, but they weren't just hers. Silver and shadow. Fire and frost. The past of her bloodline stared through her. "I see them," she whispered. "The first wolves. The ones who were stolen. The ones who died howling into silence." Kael reached for her hand. "You are not them." "I am," she said. "And more." She sat up, breathing hard. "The architects didn't just want to control us. They wanted to rewrite what wolves are. They wanted to cut us from the wild, to make us tools of memory, not instinct." Kael's jaw tightened. "And now they know you can undo that." Elara looked at him, and in her eyes, something vast stared back. "I think I can do more than undo it." She rose to her feet, barely swaying now. The fever had passed. What remained was clarity. "I don't just carry the moonborn bloodline. I carry the echo of the wild they tried to erase." Outside, the ice winds howled. The scouts whispered of tremors under the mountain. The fire pits flared blue. Sable stepped in, wide-eyed. "Something's coming. Not the memory, it's them. The first ones." Elara walked past them all, cloak sweeping, silver fire crackling at her fingertips. "They're not coming to hurt us. They're coming to see what I've become." And beyond the ridgeline, in the heart of the ever-shade expanse, shapes began to emerge. Massive. Luminous. Wolf-shaped. But not wolves. Spirits. Ancients. The untouched wild, drawn to the one soul bright enough to burn through bloodlines. Kael stepped beside her. "Are you ready for what they'll ask of you?" Elara's voice was quiet. "I don't think they'll ask. I think they'll offer." The first wolves stood on the snow like echoes made flesh. Towering. Luminous. Neither dead nor alive. Their forms shifted with the wind, for made of starlight, eyes like twin moons, claws carved from the bones of forgotten gods. And they bowed their heads to Elara. Not in submission, but in recognition. Sable dropped to her knees. Bryn couldn't speak. Even Kael, who had seen war, death, and resurrection, stood frozen, his crimson gaze locked on the impossible truth before him. These were the origin spirits. The ones who had come before Pax, before branding, before even the howl. Elara stepped forward alone. The largest of the first wolves spoke, its voice not sound, but memory made manifest. A thunder that trembled in the heart more than the bones. "You carry our fire. You walked into the place of unmaking and did not kneel. You remember who you were before they told you to forget." Elara bowed her head, not in humility, but in answer. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "None of us did. But you chose to burn instead of break. Another of them stepped forward, smaller, faster, its voice like ice cracking. "We offer you what we offered no one since the first sundering. Not just power. Not just blood. A pact." Elara's breath caught. "What kind of pact?" The sky shifted above them, and the wolves spoke in unison. "To become the flame that cannot be chained. To speak the language of storm and root. To shed the name of Moonborn and become something older. To be the alpha of wild things. The untamed. The broken. The reborn." Kael took a step forward, voice raw. "What will it cost her?" The largest spirit turned to him. "Everything mortal. Everything safe. But not love." That stopped Elara cold. "Not love," she whispered. "The architects never understood it. But we did. It is the only bond they could never erase." Kael's hand found hers. Their bond burned strong, unshaken. Elara turned to him, eyes shimmering with unshed tears and ancient starlight. "If I accept," she whispered, "I won't be just Elara anymore." Kael brushed his fingers against her cheek. "You were never just Elara. You were always more." She turned back to the first wolves. Heart steady, voice firm. "I accept." The pact ignited. Not pain. Transformation. The branded mark on her wrist flared, then burned away. The Moonborn glyph on her skin cracked and revealed something deeper beneath it. A mark shaped like a spiral of fire and thorn. Everywhere across the world, wolves felt it. Something changing. The wild stirring. A heartbeat they didn't know they'd lost until it returned. Elara fell to her knees. And rose again. Taller. Stronger. Silver eyes glowing with fire that had no source but herself. No longer bound to moon cycles. No longer chained to bloodlines. She was the first flame reborn. And the war was far from over. They felt her coming before they saw her. Not just in Shadowfang, but across the dominions, across borders, across the bones of old battlefields where silence still lingered. A heartbeat pulsed in the ground now. Not just life. Elara. She returned not with a warband or banners, but with snow melting beneath her feet and stars flickering in her wake. Her eyes still burned silver, but now it was deeper, like they remembered the shape of the sky before the moons were named. The branded wolves stood taller when she passed. The Hollowborn bowed, not in servitude, but in awe. And Kael. Kael didn't kneel. He stepped forward, met her gaze, and touched his forehead to hers in the old way. In the sacred way. "I can feel it," he whispered. "The wild in you." "It's not just in me," Elara murmured. "It's waking in all of us." Sable rushed into the courtyard, breathless. They moved. Kael turned sharply. "Who?" Sable held up a torn scroll. "The architects. A conclave of 7. Hidden across 7 veiled sanctuaries. They've activated the last protocol." "Phase 4, Elara said, eyes narrowing. "The cleansing. The final failsafe. Not to control wolves. To erase them. From bloodlines, from history, from magic." Bryn arrived behind her with a travel ledger. "All 7 sanctuaries require keys. Old blood. Blood that predates the guild. They're trying to seal the wild again," Sable said. "And if they succeed, they erase the spark," Elara finished. "The rebellion. The Hollowborn. The first wolves. All of it." Kael folded his arms. "Then we stop them." Elara's jaw clenched, and her voice deepened, not just with anger, but with command. "No more reaction. No more defense. We go first." They began to divide the tasks. Sable would lead the effort to rally Hollowborn across distant packs, those still uncertain where they stood. Bryn would oversee securing the Dominion borders, forming temporary alliances, even with former guild nobles, under new laws that Elara had rewritten with her own hand. And Elara? She and Kael would go after the first sanctuary. The Sanctum of Roots. The place where wolves were first named. First split. First shackled. But not this time. Now, the flame walked with them. And the wild would answer. The journey to the Sanctum of Roots took them beneath the earth. Past ruined rivers carved by vanished gods. Through tunnels laced with sigils so old they pulsed before magic had language. Every stone whispered. Not lies. Not warnings. Memories. Kael moved like shadow beside her, every muscle coiled, every sense stretched tight. But Elara, she was calm. Because the closer they got, the more her blood hummed. Like the wild was guiding her home. "This place," Kael muttered as they entered the main cavern. "It's alive." The sanctum opened like a wound. A vast underground cathedral of twisted roots and glowing bark. Trees had grown into the stone itself, impossibly ancient, gnarled and breathing. At the center, a monolith, pulsing faintly, bound with 7 runes. The first seal. Kael stepped closer. "This is where they named us, isn't it?" Elara nodded slowly. "Not with sorrow. With fire. The architects believed if they could name us, they could define us. Trap our instincts. Twist our wolves into obedience." She placed her hand on the monolith. And the cavern shuddered. Visions hit her, flashes of the past. A pack of wild wolves, untouched by hierarchy, shifting freely beneath 3 moons. A ritual gone wrong. 7 figures cloaked in bone and void, carving the first sigils into the world. Chains woven from names. The power wasn't in the colors. It was in the words. "They didn't brand us with metal," Elara whispered. "They branded us with belief." Kael touched her shoulder. "Can we unmake it?" Elara turned to him, and her flame ignited. "I'm not here to unmake it," she said. "I'm here to rewrite it." She stepped forward and spoke a new word. Not in the tongue of the architects. Not in the tongue of the dominions. But in the language of wolves. No alphabets. No symbols. Just a sound, a howl older than obedience. The monolith cracked. 1 rune faded. The first seal, broken. Far away, in a tower made of bones and secrets, one of the architects felt it. She looked up from her altar, fury crawling across her once immortal face. "She remembers," the architect hissed. "And she rewrites." The moment the first seal broke, the world shifted. Wolves across the dominions flinched, some dropping to their knees, others gasping as their instincts surged like wildfire. Old bindings loosened. Buried power stirred. And far in the south, in a ruined citadel that had not been marked on maps in 600 years, the architects awakened. There were 7 of them. Not mortal. Not quite spirit. They were ideas given form, each one a piece of the original control, born in the age when wolves were still being shaped. The one called Eris, the whisperer of obedience, shattered her crystal scrying basin in fury. "She dares rewrite the pact," she hissed. The Flameborn, another architect, veiled in moths and fog, spoke calmly. "She has the root. The blood. The fire. We gave her too much. She took it," Eris snapped. "Now we take it back." The others moved in eerie unity. And somewhere deep in the realm between magic and memory, Phase 4 began. Back at Shadowfang, chaos spread fast. Bryn intercepted a courier from the southern reaches, one of the new freeholds established by Hollowborn and branded wolves alike. It had been raised. No survivors. No scent trail. Only a message burned into the stone in runes older than the guild. Freedom was a mistake. Elara and Kael returned to find the stronghold bracing for war. Not a political clash. Not a rebellion. But a war of unmaking. "They're trying to erase the changes we've made," Bryn said. "This isn't conquest. It's reversion." Sable, who now trained Hollowborn in the use of awakened instincts, entered carrying a map. "They're not just attacking strongholds. They're targeting the next sanctums." 3 more had been located. 3 more seals. 3 more chances to rewrite the old laws. But they weren't just racing to rewrite now. They were racing to survive. Elara stood atop the highest spire that night, Kael at her side, wind tearing at their cloaks. "If we fail," she said quietly, "they'll strip the wild from every wolf. There won't be packs. Or bonds. Or freedom." Kael didn't answer at first. Then, gently, "We won't fail." She turned to him. "How can you be so sure?" His hand curled around hers. Warm. Certain. "Because you're not a rebellion anymore. You're the story the world forgot. And stories don't die. They spread." The second sanctum didn't rise from the earth or sink beneath it. It hung. A fortress suspended in air, resting atop ancient tree roots, levitating above a chasm so deep it whispered your fears back to you. The Sanctum of Breath. The architect name for it was forgotten, but its purpose remained. To hold the second seal, the one tied to desire, to longing, to the unspoken hunger that made wolves chase more than survival. The temptation of peace, of comfort, of power. Elara and Kael approached alone. The bridge was thin, ancient, carved from living vinewood and bone. Every step buzzed with old magic, alive and alert. "She's already watching," Kael murmured. "She wants me to doubt," Elara replied. And she did. Because the second the sanctum doors opened, the world changed. They didn't enter a hall. They entered a memory. Elara blinked, and suddenly she was in the past. Not her own. A version of her that had never rebelled. She saw herself dressed in silver silks, branded and obedient, standing beside a guild lord. There were no scars on her wrists, no fire in her eyes. She smiled politely, laughed on command. Kael was there too, but different. Colored, empty-eyed, silent behind her like a guard without a soul. And in this false world, they were safe. Content. Not free, but unchallenged. "You could have this," a voice whispered in her ear, velvet and wrong. "No war. No loss. No blood. Just rest. Isn't that what you want, Flameborn?" Elara turned and met Eris, the Whisperer. Not in full form, but close. She wore a face made of every woman Elara had ever trusted, ever feared, ever lost. She smiled with kindness sharpened into chains. "Your wolves are tired," Eris said softly. "Your love bleeds every time he fights. The Hollowborn still suffer. Why fight a war that can never end?" Elara didn't answer. She turned instead and walked to the version of herself still standing beside the guild lord. She stared into that obedient girl's silver eyes and whispered, "I don't want your peace." Then she lifted her hand, ignited her real fire, and burned the illusion to ash. The sanctum shook. The false world collapsed. And Kael was suddenly beside her again, breathless, eyes blazing. "They tried to pull me in too." "I know," she said. Together, they stepped into the heart of the sanctum and saw the second seal, carved into a pillar of living root and memory. Elara placed her hand on it, and didn't whisper a howl this time. She spoke. Words that were hers. Words not from the first wolves or the architects, but forged in rebellion, in blood, in love. "We are not afraid of hunger. We are not afraid of longing. Because we choose what we become." The seal cracked. The second chain broke. Far away, Eris screamed. 2 seals broken. 5 remained. And with each fracture, the world changed more tangibly. Wolves who had lived their whole lives numb began to feel. Those who had never shifted beyond sanctioned forms suddenly woke with new limbs, ancient instincts. Pack songs that had been outlawed for centuries were remembered, not taught, but felt, passed through blood and bond. And the architects felt it too. They no longer watched from shadows. They convened. 7 thrones, woven from silence, bone, and forgotten oaths, lit for the first time in millennia. 6 were filled. The 7th stood cracked. Its owner, Eris, was fading, her energy frayed, her presence thin. She broke the second chain, hissed the one known only as the unmourned. "She is no longer rewriting," said another. "She is unmaking the cage itself." They turned toward the head of the circle. The tallest, the oldest, the architect of origin, cloaked in void light. Eyes blind yet all-seeing. "She has awakened the wild beyond structure," one muttered. "She's a danger to more than wolves," said another. And the architect of origin finally spoke, its voice not a sound, but a shift in gravity. "Then we answer in kind. Begin Phase 5. Back at Shadowfang, the world was bracing. The Hollowborn legions, now free-willed, named chosen, bond-linked, trained under Kael's watch. Bryn coordinated the expansion of their territories, fortifying the new sanctuaries under Elara's growing symbol, the spiral flame and thorn. But beneath it all, Elara grew quieter. She stared into fire longer. Spoke less. Not from doubt, from knowing. Because Phase 5 wasn't war. It was reversal. Already, Messages came in from packs across the northern front. A mateless alpha had been rewritten overnight, her bond history wiped from her memory. Hollowborn wolves were found turning feral, not due to trauma, but to external rewriting. Ancient bonds burned. Names vanished from ancestral stone. Elders died without legacy. Elara stood over one such elder, a branded healer who had once saved a village with herbs, now dead, and his name already erased from the archives. Sable trembled beside her. "They're not killing us," she whispered. "They're erasing the proof we were ever here." Kael turned to Elara, eyes flaring gold red. "How do we stop that?" Elara closed the old man's eyes gently, then looked up, voice sharp and clear. "We stop waiting for them to make the next move. We take the fight to the third sanctum." Bryn stepped forward. "We think we've located it. South of the Sundering Sea. Hidden under what's left of the Guild's oldest archive tower." Sable added, "It's warded by memory magic. Any who enter forget why they came." Kael looked to Elara, and she gave a single nod. "Then we remember for them." They crossed the Sundering Sea in silence. Not because of fear, because of focus. The third sanctum was unlike the others. Not bound to flame or blood or instinct. It guarded something more delicate. Truth. Buried. Twisted. Forgotten on purpose. The Sanctum of Memory was built beneath the Ash Spire, the last standing tower of the original guild's stronghold. It was now a ruin half swallowed by the earth, choked by bone vines and ghost root. Birds didn't nest in it. No beast made home nearby. Too much forgotten. Too much deliberately erased. They approached with caution. Elara, Kael, Sable, and Bryn descended through shattered floors and rotting stairwells. The deeper they went, the colder it became, not from temperature, but from absence. No scent. No sound. No emotion. The air didn't remember them. And then the first illusion began. Sable gasped as the corridor around them shifted, becoming her childhood home. Whole. Perfect. Her father alive. Her mother humming a lullaby she hadn't heard since she was 6. She froze. Bryn grabbed her arm. "That's not real. They're using your blood." Kael spun, alert. "The Sanctum reads memories and tries to rewrite you from the inside out." Elara clenched her fists. "Then we don't fight it by resisting. We fight it by remembering harder." She drew a blade, not of silver, not of bone, but of ink and fire, carved with names. Her name. Sable's name. Kael's name. The names of every Hollowborn who had chosen identity over obedience. She cut her palm and let the names spill. The illusions cracked. Sable's family faded. Bryn's illusion of her lost sister vanished. Kael staggered, growling. He'd seen a world where he had never been made hybrid. Where he was only wolf, never vampire, never torn between instincts. A life without Elara. Without fire. He dropped to one knee. Elara caught him. "You are not broken," she whispered. "You're the proof that we're evolving." He nodded, barely. They pressed forward until they reached the core. A single white tree. No leaves. No shadow. Its bark carved with hundreds of names. And next to it, a pedestal. On it, a book bound in memory skin. Alive. The archive, Elara whispered. The original book of all wolves. The one the architects used to dictate bloodlines. She reached for it. It screamed. Not a voice, a flood. Her own memories surged. Her branding. Her silence. Her first kiss. Her first kill. The fire. The rising. The loss. The moment she became more. She didn't resist. She accepted. And then she did something no one had done since the architects first wrote the laws of wolves. She tore a page out. And replaced it with a blank one. Then, in her own blood, she wrote, "We remember. We reclaim. We remain." The third seal broke. The white tree bled. And across the dominions, every wolf who had forgotten who they were remembered again. The third seal broke, and the world shuddered. Every architect felt it, not as a loss, but as a wound. For the first time in eons, the balance tilted against them. The architect of origin rose from her throne. Not with rage, but with resolve. "We gave them names so they would never rise above them," she said to the others. "Now they write their own." The unmourned hissed. She will rewrite the world. She already has, said Eris, flickering now, barely held together after the second sanctum. The architects turned toward the next phase. They could not destroy Elara through blood or memory. So now, they would target what she had rebuilt. Her mercy. Her unity. Her people. Back in Shadowfang, the rebellion felt the shift. Wolves staggered as if a great pressure lifted. Some held openly, others wept. Branded, hollowborn, hybrid, unmated, across every divide, they remembered things they weren't supposed to. Their original forms. Bonds lost in early life. Names taken from them as punishment. Kael felt it in the marrow of his bones. We're getting stronger, he said. But so are they. Sable ran into the chamber. They've retaliated. Not with armies. With choices. What do you mean? Bryn asked. She held up a sealed scroll, trembling. They sent a message. To Elara. Elara took it with slow hands. Unfolded it. And read it in silence. Then looked up. They're giving me a choice. Kael frowned. What kind of choice? Her jaw tightened. They'll surrender the fourth seal. No traps. No illusions. One architect will deliver it in person. That's good, Bryn said, cautious. Elara's voice went flat. In return, I must agree to burn the rest of the rebellion down. Dissolve the new pacts. Unmake the new names. Let the dominions return to order. Silence. Peace, Elara said bitterly. Their version of it. Kael stepped close. It's a bluff. No, Elara whispered. It's worse. It's a gift. Because it offered her something more dangerous than chains or war. A way out. If she agreed, the war would end. No more blood. No more sanctums. No more loss. But everything they'd built would be undone. Sable's voice broke the silence. What will you do? Elara stared at the scroll. Then, slowly, she set it on fire. The flames didn't consume it. They rewrote it. With her power. Her choice. And her voice echoed as the scroll curled into ash. I will not trade survival for silence. I will not rule over a peace built on chains. If they fear fire, then they should remember I am flame. They didn't wait. Not this time. Elara, Kael, Bryn, and Sable moved fast, crossing Dominion lines with a fire trail of allies behind them. Hollowborn legions. Branded healers turned generals. Rogue packs who had once stayed neutral now raised the spiral flame and thorn banner high. Because all of them knew the truth. The fourth sanctum wasn't just a stronghold. It was a summoning ground. The architects weren't hiding anymore. They were calling something down. Or worse, calling something back. They reached it by nightfall. The land around the fourth sanctum was scorched and humming, pulsing with energy that didn't belong to this world. Trees bent the wrong way. Water flowed uphill. Wolves who stepped too close lost time, names, even their voices. And at the center stood the structure. A tower of bone and stars. Not built, but grown, spun from architect memory and stitched together with old wolf blood. Elara stared up at it, something ancient and furious rising in her. We're too late, she said. Kael's hand brushed hers. Not if we end it fast. Sable trembled, clutching a relic made from hollowborn breath magic. They've torn a hole in the veil. Whatever they're summoning, it's not architect. It's older. Bryn swore. You think it's one of the gods they erased? No, Elara said, silver light burning in her irises. I think it's the one they couldn't. They stormed the sanctum. No stealth. No hesitation. The inside was alive, walls beating like lungs, floors bleeding memory, corridors shifting with the footsteps of every wolf who'd ever died believing they were broken. And at the top, inside a ritual chamber carved into a spiraling void, stood the summoner. The architect of origin. No face. No voice. Just presence. It turned to Elara and bowed. We summoned it for you. You broke the laws. So now we'll let you face their first form. Come see what was caged so you could be born. The void behind the architect cracked open. And a god stepped out. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't anything. It was everything wolves had been told to forget: rage without leash, instinct without language, freedom so absolute it burned. It looked at Elara. And howled. Not in challenge, but in recognition. Because it remembered her flame. It remembered the wild in her. Kael drew his blades. Bryn shouted for the troops to fall back. Sable screamed something lost in the roar of the sky. But Elara didn't flinch. She stepped forward and howled back. The chamber cracked with sound. Elara's howl echoed through time, not just air. It tore through memories, shattered sigils, and reached the god. And the god, that ancient force of unbound instinct, paused. Not because it was tamed, but because it listened. All around them, the ritual chamber shook. Reality bent. Wolves outside the sanctum fell to the ground, clutching their heads as visions surged. The first flame, the first shift, the first pack. The god was not a being. It was the wild itself. What the architects had spent centuries fearing, fighting, and finally burying beneath names and laws and marks. Now it stood in front of Elara. Eyes like endless forests. Breath like thunder through leaves. A presence too massive to fight. Kael stepped forward, ready to defend her. But Elara lifted her hand. No. She walked alone toward the god. Unarmed. Unarmored. But not powerless. I know what you are, Elara whispered. You're what we were before the laws. Before the brands. Before the cages. The god's head tilted, a mountain of bone and starlight. And yet you walk in chains. Elara smiled. I broke mine. And I've been breaking theirs. You are still limited by love. By names. By memory. No, she said. I'm rooted in them. She raised her hands, glowing with the marks she had carved into herself, not given, but chosen. I didn't come here to bind you, she said. I came to ask you to stand with us. The god roared, wind and flame and wild made deafening. But within it, Elara heard something else. Grief. The wild had not been waiting to be released. It had been waiting to be understood. And Elara, branded girl, rebel queen, flame-born wolf, offered it that. The god lowered its massive head. And in the silence that followed, it touched its forehead to hers. Not submission. Acknowledgement. A pact older than words. Outside the sanctum, wolves gasped as the tower's magic shattered. The god stepped out, no longer monstrous, but part of the world again. Kael ran to Elara, caught her as she stumbled. You did it. She smiled weakly. I didn't defeat it. No, Kael said. You became it. Later that night, as the rebellion rebuilt their camp and the stars returned to their rightful places, Bryn stepped into Elara's tent. The fourth seal is broken, she said. But the others are moving now. Sable added, the architects aren't summoning. They're running. Kael turned to Elara. What's next? Elara, now more wild than wolf, more flame than flesh, looked to the horizon. They wanted gods to end us. But now we are what they feared. She rose. Cloaked in wind. Marked by choice. Followed by wolves. And gods. And she whispered. Now we hunt them. They ran. Not just as rebels now. Not even as wolves. They moved like a myth-given chase. Elara led the pack herself, Kael at her side, Sable and Bryn behind, followed by thousands who bore no more brands, no collars, no numbers. Only names. Only the wild. And ahead of them, the final refuge of the architects. The sanctum of fate. It was not on any map. It existed where the world frayed at the edges. Between storm and silence, where even time dared not step. The last architect stronghold. The place where all destinies were once written and rewritten. The journey tore through every realm. They crossed the cinderline wastes in half a night, outrunning storms not born of weather but of unraveling history. They passed through hollow cities where architect magic had drained every sound, where wolves walked without voices or memories. But none of it stopped them. Because Elara burned brighter now. Not as a queen. Not even as a god. But as a wild truth no longer willing to be edited. And then, at the edge of breath and shadow, they reached it. The sanctum of fate. A spire of obsidian and bone, swirling with strands of magic that pulsed like veins. Every thread shimmered with a different wolf story, paths that had been forced, futures that had been stolen. Kael growled low. They've been writing us like scripts. No, Elara said. They've been trapping us. And inside that sanctum was the quill, the final tool of the architects. Whoever controlled it could bend stories. But now it was unguarded. The architects had gathered in the inner sanctum. 6 thrones. All full. Waiting. They entered as a pack. Not in formation. Not in fear. Just present. And powerful. The architects rose. The architect of origin stepped forward. You were not meant to come this far. Elara didn't answer. You were meant to rebel. To burn. Then to break. Still silence. You were meant to die as a symbol. Not endure as a force. Then Elara finally spoke, her voice like wild thunder over still water. I was meant to be forgotten. But I wrote myself back into the world. The architect lifted a single, pale hand toward the weaving loom, the quill still glowing. One last offer, Flameborn. Sit. Write your wolf's fate. Become what we were. Elara walked forward. Kael's breath caught. Sable reached for her. Bryn braced herself. Elara approached the loom and snapped the quill in half. The light dimmed. The loom stuttered. The threads of fate unraveled. No more cages, she said. No more stories written by those who don't live them. The architects screamed not with sound, but with collapse. Their thrones crumbled. Their names were lost to time. And the sanctum of fate? It burned. Later, as the world began to rebuild, wolves whispered of what happened that night. Some said Elara ended the gods. Some said she became one. But those closest to her knew the truth. She became the last lie the world would ever tell about wolves. And then she rewrote it. Peace came quietly. Not with horns. Not with crowns. With breathing. The kind wolves had forgotten how to do fully. Not cautious. Not hidden. Just alive. The sanctum of fate was gone. The architects were gone. Their thrones shattered, their spells broken, their names erased from even the deep places. What remained? Choice. The dominions did not reform as they were. They evolved. Some were led by councils of bonded wolves, Alpha, Beta, Omega, all equals by vow, not rank. Some Hollowborn founded their own settlements, unbound by past caste. New rituals were born, celebrations of the wild, not to control it, but to honor what survived. And above all, the branded stopped being pitted. They became revered. Because branded wolves had remembered when others forgot. They had carried the stories on scarred skin. They had burned, but never broken. Elara did not take a throne. She did not rule. She wandered. Sometimes with Kael. Sometimes alone. She would appear on the night of a birth, or at the first howl of a wolf finding their name. She'd sit beside newly formed packs and listen, not to lead, but to learn. And then she would vanish again. Still fire. Still wild. But quieter now. One night, Kael found her at the edge of the world, on a cliff where wind met sea and stars felt touchable. You left without saying goodbye, he murmured. She smiled. I never needed to. You always follow. He sat beside her. They still call you Flameborn. They can call me whatever they like, she said. I know who I am now. Do you ever wish it had been different? She looked out at the sea. I used to. When I was branded. When I was silent. And now? Now I know the fire wasn't the curse. It was the invitation. Kael leaned in. To what? To become the kind of story no one can rewrite. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Elara rose, her cloak catching the wind like wings. I'll come back, she said. Kael grinned. You always do. And if I don't, she added softly, just look for the sparks. And with that, she shifted into her wild form. Not just wolf. Not just flame. But something free. And she ran into the wind, leaving fire in her footsteps and silence in her place. Not an ending. Just a beginning.